Okay, we're recording. Yeah, I guess the idea was to talk about some different considerations for governance of the, the working group sessions, for example. One of the things I could have pushed forward more in the last meeting is that, we're figuring this out together, and I don't want this to be a top-down approach at all. Oh, here's someone else. Ray. I don't know if we've had a Ray before, have we?
Don't think so.
Hey, Ray.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, how's it going? Nice to meet you.
Likewise, nice to meet you as well.
I don't think you've joined our sessions before. Are you from Kernel?
Yeah, I am. I'm in
Okay.
KB4. Yeah.
Great. What sort of stuff are you working on?
I'm in the DeFi space, doing crypto economics
Cool.
with Python, but definitely interested in AI stuff. So excited to listen and hear what you guys have to say.
Okay, nice. Welcome. I don't know, have you met anyone in this group before? Maybe Greg?
Greg, and I've seen Holly on some conversations. I don't know if we've spoken directly though.
Cool. Maybe we could do a quick round of introductions for people that you don't know, I guess. So I'm Richard. Me and Hitesh are in kernel block 4 as well as Algovera. And we're basically trying to explore a project asking the question, how might we decentralize AI? And we can't find that much work on it previously. So my background is as a machine learning engineer in a few big tech companies, and became disillusioned with some of the different aspects, and then came across Web3, which resonated with a lot of my values. And now we're trying to explore how we can combine Web3 with AI research and commercialization, and how that might change the space of AI.
Nice, very interesting.
I think Richard did a lot of the heavy lifting for me. So my name is Hitesh, and I'm working with Richard. My background is in a bit of health science, a bit of software engineering, and a bit of sort of startup and scaling companies and building new products. So a bit of everything, but master of none sort of expertise of none. So yeah, that's just a quick introduction of me. I'll pass it on to Holly.
Hey, hi, I'm Holly Grimm. I was a part of KB2 and then a mentor for KB3 and KB4. I'm a freelance Solidity developer, and I'm mostly interested in climate projects using satellite imagery and machine learning to process that data. And art too. I do AI art.
Oh, nice.
Everything.
Exciting.
Yeah, master of everything, Holly, I think is.
Yeah, and Ray and I have chatted a few times, but I guess just to explain why I'm here, I just find it really interesting to see the intersection between DeFi and machine learning data science. And even though it hasn't been an exhaustive search, I haven't really found too many projects that are in that overlapping part of the Venn diagram. So I'm just interested in exploring this.
And we're hoping as well. We're chatting to Greg a little bit, but we might start some new weekly sessions around finance and machine learning. That could be a really interesting space to explore. As you say, there's not too much work on it, and if we could explore, the business use case for it and how we might start to assemble people working on a project, I think that would be really interesting in some other sessions. But yes, I was just saying before you were joining that we have these hacking sessions on Thursdays. And the idea is to go through the whole process of developing a machine learning algorithm using new Web3 tools. And there's quite a few new tools. So lots of stuff from, for example, the idea of data marketplaces, where you can buy and sell data, which is quite new to data scientists who are used to just downloading data sets for free. And also new private AI technologies, which are just starting to reach maturity, which are where you can train on private data sets, where you write an algorithm, the algorithm is sent over the network to someone's private data set, the algorithm does some training or generates some results, and then the trained algorithm and the results are returned to you. So you never actually see the data, but you can train on it. And so that's another new technology. And then also this idea of remote work, which a lot of us weren't used to before the pandemic. We're just getting up to speed with all of these new coordination tools. We've got another new person here now as well. Hey, Christian.
Hey.
How's it going?
Great, how are you?
Yeah, good. I don't know have you been to any of our sessions before? I don't think so.
I have not, no.
Great, it's nice to meet you.
You as well.
We just did some short introductions there. I don't know if you want to give like a very quick background about yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So thanks for having me. And so I'm in Kernel. I'm a KB4 fellow. And quick background about me and how it pertains to AI. I think would be relevant. So I'm based in Toronto, Canadian, and from an educational background, I did 2 degrees, one in math and statistics, mainly focused on statistics, and then a second one, which was a master's in basically data science and analytics. And then I messed around with a few blockchain projects a few years ago I have a twin brother who studied the same stuff as me and is in blockchain full time. So we worked on a couple of healthcare blockchain projects actually back in the day, which got me intro to the tech early on. But those didn't work out, although they were fantastic from the learning point of view. And then I transitioned to ad tech, just kind of as like my first, I guess second career move at a company that was growing. Worked there for 3 years. I was focused mainly on like ML and analytics, and then shifted over more to like product strategy and that kind of stuff as the company grew. And yeah, I left that company about a month ago, 2 months ago now, to focus on something that I'm working on full time now called Component, which is it's actually my adventure for Kernel, but it's a company that I'm focused on full time now. Basically, it's very I guess DeFi intersected with data and analytics. That's like the area that we're building in. So very applicable to the combo.
Fantastic. So full-time crypto.
Yeah, full-time crypto Web3. Yeah.
Nice. My last day in industry is on Thursday. So
nice.
Very
Congrats.
close to being full-time crypto. Just very quickly, just to get a sense, like my background is AI, for example, and I've worked in mostly computer vision for some big tech companies. And even before that, I was a mechanical engineer. So just kind of like physicsy stuff, so like fluid dynamics and heat transfer and stuff. So I've moved around, made some big career moves as well.
Awesome.
Hitesh, I don't know if you want to give a quick.
Yeah, so myself and Richard started this project. I'm mainly focused around the strategy, business development side of things and operation side of things. I've background in health science and transitioned into software engineering and then blockchain and cryptography, and so moved around a couple of fields as well. But yeah, just that's just a brief intro. Maybe we can dive into the conversation. I think that's probably everybody who's about to join.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. So I was just saying that we started these hacking sessions on Thursdays, where the idea is to go through the whole process of training a machine learning model using these new Web3 tools. And there's quite a few different ones. So for example, data marketplaces, which are quite a new idea instead of downloading the data. Also these private AI technologies, like training on private data sets where you don't actually have access to the data. And also all of these new coordination tools, because like for me personally anyway, it was the first time I had worked remotely at the start of the pandemic. And now it seems like all of these coordination tools are kind of exploding. And so we're starting to ask the question about do we even need the tech company anymore? Or do we have enough coordination tools and finance tools and all of these other tools that AI companies provide to actually just, do it decentrally ourselves? And so the question is, like, how do we form these working groups? For example, how do we ensure that everyone gets fair ownership of what is created during the working group? And so I posted some ideas in our Discord just over the weekend, where one of the ideas was, the other thing is as well, I don't want this to be a top-down process. We're all figuring this out together, and I really have no idea what I'm doing most of the time. Even if I pretend I sound like I know what I'm talking about, but a lot of this stuff has never been done before. And so we really just want to kind of iterate and experiment with new ideas on how to coordinate people and just take the most successful methods. And here's Fiona. We'll just say hello quickly. Hey, Vienna. Hey, Vienna, how's it going?
Hey.
Hey, good to see you. Yeah, we were just chatting about coordination and governance of working groups for data science projects, basically. And so we formed this working group of 6 people in the last hacking session, and we came up with this idea. I think we were leaning towards using something like a generative art algorithm as our first proof of concept of a project that we could work together. And so the idea behind that is there are quite a few generative art projects in the NFT space. But most of the time, what happens is that people use a generative model off-chain, and then the output of that model they put on-chain as an NFT. And we were thinking maybe we could unlock some more value by, putting a machine learning model on-chain, or a link to the model on-chain, at least that's encrypted. And then we could issue some model tokens for that model. And other like investors or people who are NFT enthusiasts could buy the algorithm tokens if they thought that it was a cool project, or they could provide liquidity between the algorithm tokens and some other token, which means that they can earn a yield every time the model is used, for example. And so basically, yes, we want to go through this whole process of creating an algorithm, publishing it on a marketplace, creating these algorithm tokens, and making sure that everything is shared equally. And so one of the ideas that I had, that like maybe we can start with this question, had this idea that we could start a DAO for the working group. Like maybe just set it up on DAO House. You can do it completely through the UI, add everyone as a member of the DAO. Maybe put some funds in a shared treasury that can be used as this working group sees fit towards expenses and that sort of thing. Maybe we could hold a vote through the DAO, for example, for some like key idea. For example, which type of generative model do we want to use, for example? And the thinking behind this was that it means that people don't have to trust us that we're going to distribute all of the algorithm tokens fairly at the end. We want it to be trustless. We want it to be like written in code how the cooperation is going to be defined at the start. And then the DAO could have the control of issuing the algorithm tokens. Maybe they could mint more as more people join the project, or just manage it like they would a currency, I suppose. So I don't know if anyone wants to jump in there and has any ideas about whether this is a good idea, terrible idea, or anything like that.
Right. If I can quickly jump in, I felt so when you say put the models and everything on chain, I know that this is your question to Ben as well. And I do remember I talked to Ben about this at one point, and he mentioned something, I don't know if it's Cardano or something, that he's going to put it on there. Like one reason that I was working with Ben in the early days, this is like 3-4 years ago, was because he was going into that problem as well, like where, like it's impossible to put it on Ethereum, for example, because of the fees that's involved. Now, I'm curious if you had thought about like what, and by the way, that was also why I was working on Agoric back then, to enable even things like AI to be built on it. But then I mean, I haven't looked into what kind of chains are available these days. You guys have a thing that you converge on already?
I think like first Vienna means Ben Goertzel of SingularityNet, so like that's a great person to learn from. I haven't really looked too much into SingularityNet, so maybe his plan is to put like the entire model on chain, whereas the approach that Ocean uses, which is built on Ethereum, is to just, for the dataset anyway, they just put a link to the dataset on chain, and it's actually stored off chain and it's encrypted. And so I think that's how Ocean Protocol works for algorithms as well, where it's all stored off chain in a place of your choosing, whether that's a local server, Amazon Cloud, or something like IPFS. And so that's how they solve the storage problem.
Okay.
So that was our thinking, that we would just use maybe Ocean Protocol to start, but also be open to other tools as well, as we were talking about, Greg, like whether that's SingularityNet or some, I don't know, Fetch AI. I don't know how they solve the problem with models and stuff. So I'm definitely open to exploring other options for this as well.
Yeah, and I hate to put Ray on the spot, especially because he just turned off his camera, but I know that Ray is pretty experienced with chains in Solana specifically. So I don't know if you had any comments or if you've seen anything in that space, Ray. If not, we can move on.
Maybe he stepped away for a second.
Yeah,
we can grab him.
It is lunchtime in New York, so
nice. Solana is a really interesting one as well. I'd love to explore that as well. So yeah, all of these options are great, and if anyone has experience, fantastic.
Yeah, as long as you're not looking to do like a lot of storage on chain, Solana is good, because Solana is very difficult to because it's so fast. This is just based off a hackathon I did like 8 months ago, but we were trying to basically build like the liquidity protocol, but on Solana, called zero interest. And one of the like toughest things that we had was even just like recording state changes and like updating the protocol accordingly. So like if, for example, if someone deposits money, it changes like what the APY is for everyone. Like even doing things like that in terms of like account and data storage is really difficult. So I guess it would just depend on like what is being stored on chain, I guess. Like if it's just a record, like a proof of record or something like that, or like an output, then I think the world's your oyster in terms of blockchains that you could use.
Suppose as well, you can try out these different models, and ideally it should be sort of chain agnostic almost. I suppose our question here is like, what's the most pragmatic and what's the most what's the lowest hanging fruit that we can utilize to test this? And that could be sort of the already existing mechanism that Ocean has in place for sort of compute to data.
Yeah. On Ocean, Ocean try to be chain agnostic as well, and so you can launch a data set on loads of different chains. One of them is Polygon, which is where most people are launching. You can launch on Moonriver now as well, which is the Ethereum virtual machine for Polkadot. And even I think they have like Energy Web Chain and stuff as well. So who knows, maybe they'll have like Solana and even Cardano at some point soon, if Cardano ever implements smart contracts, that is. Yeah, Greg was saying that you have some experience with Solana and you might have come across some sort of, marketplace. Are there any marketplaces on Solana that are aiming to serve machine learning models or any AI use cases or anything like that?
I don't think I've seen that. I could definitely check. But yeah, I don't think I've seen that yet.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, me neither. Okay, great. Yeah, so like in terms of then the working group, How do we get working groups working together, and what sort of governance do we need on top of projects? What does everyone think about this idea of spinning up a DAO for each project almost, or is that too many DAOs? Like how many DAOs is too many DAOs? And is that over engineering something that should be happening on a more trust-based system, or what do people think about that?
I mean, I think like one of the, not issues, but like in terms of like, what's the goal of the DAO? Is it to, like, if we think about just like the base goal of what you want to accomplish, is it having people like being able to record and also reward in terms of incentives, like people who have contributed? Like, is that the base goal, or what is the base goal?
I guess they're multiple, yeah. So like one of them is to ensure that we come to a consensus on how everyone is rewarded, for sure. And like maybe that needs to be adaptable and flexible, as you know, maybe people join the working session towards the end of the working sessions. How do we come to a consensus on that? And I don't want it to be centrally driven by us. I want like some way of achieving consensus with everyone. So that's one of the first considerations. And then another consideration is that these hacking sessions were kind of designed for onboarding data science teams who, it may be the first time that they've used a lot of these Web3 tools. And so we want to get them to install a digital wallet as a very first step, and then maybe like take part in their first vote in Web3, maybe you know, share a Gnosis safe for the first time. And I think a lot of the magic of Web3 is in using these tools with like people all over the world. And so I'd say there would even be a use for like, you know, exploring these tools with them, even if they weren't useful. But I also think they can be useful. So it's like two birds with one stone.
Yeah, and
Sorry.
go on. So I know that back on Singularity Net, how they did it is that they have multiple different tokens, like one for governance, where you know people get to decide on like what directions of the various kind of things, and then you also have a kind of more like use tokens, like usage tokens, like for example, you could pay AI services in that tokens. And then, you know, there's also points where you could convert your governance tokens to one of the usage tokens as well, at a certain, you know, extra of if you got in early or something. Like, I'm curious if, you know, you're thinking about tokens like in terms of like having multiple different type of tokens, or like a DAO having like, or is voting just going to be purely done on the DAO? Or I don't know if it's voting, but you know, a way where directions and decisions are made, you know, or rough consensus.
Do you mean like the issue with financial based voting that Vitalik is talking about? Like decoupling governance from financialization?
Yeah, that.
Yeah, that's a really good question as well. And like we also want some sort of reputation in our system. So if people work on a lot of projects, it would be great if the tokens that they acquire for these projects could be used for some sort of reputation. But if we purely use tokens, they can sell the tokens, and therefore you can kind of trade in reputation, which we don't want. And so I've seen some blogs talk about like having two different tokens. And so when you do work on a project, you get an equal amount of reputation tokens and just standard tokens. But the difference is that you can sell your standard tokens if you need money, whereas the reputation tokens aren't transferable, for example. And so I think there's some really interesting ideas we could explore with that as well.
Yeah, and actually I had an idea about this the other day. So I've been working on this project called Footy DAO with this guy that I met. How did I even meet him? On Twitter. And we're basically trying to purchase like a football club through a DAO and like govern it through a DAO, which is like a big endeavor. And he's working on it pretty full time, and I'm just kind of helping out where I can, very early stages. And we've come across the same thing, because you don't want to introduce like a liquid token market that's going to be volatile early on, when all you really care about is reporting people's contribution and like that reputation as well. And so we just had like the simple idea. I don't know if this is viable, but just doing it on testnet, because if all you care about is the amount of tokens that are distributed to people and you don't care about the monetary value they have right now, but like maybe what that might translate to in the future, then, you know, having that on Goerli or something where it's still like immutable, it's still the same as, you know, the L1, then it kind of serves that purpose, which could be interesting. And it doesn't cost anything.
That's really interesting, actually. Yeah.
Because I think it kind of decouples like the financial aspect, you know, from from the ownership of the tokens.
Really interesting. Yeah. As long as no one is kind of trying to game your system,
Yeah.
you have no adversaries.
I was just going to say, like, you know, it's a very hard problem to solve, because you could very well say, like, I'll transfer you my test tokens for $5, you know, and that's introducing financialization into the whole aspect. But it's I suppose it's a very cheap way to bootstrap a token model. You know, if it doesn't need to be on the mainnet.
I was just going to maybe ask an open question, just to like take this out of Web3 for a second. You know, so a DAO is a solution to a problem or multiple problems. But if we say it's a solution to one problem, you know, what is the primary problem or the primary mission that we want to accomplish? And you know, we could say, well, we're trying to onboard data scientists into the world of Web3. That could be a mission. Could be guaranteeing some level of financial security for data scientists, freelance data scientists. Could be something like that. You know, I don't think this would be the winner, but you know, my personal interest is to kind of have a brain trust to help solve data science problems that I'm encountering in DeFi. But you know, I think that's maybe a bit more narrow. But you know, I guess if you define or we define the primary mission, then I think the rest will follow the structure and what have you.
Yeah, I think that's the one I'm really interested in as well. That's definitely the one that has the biggest market. Like, we're closest to getting product market fit on the people that want data science problem solved in Web3. And like with Web3, we have, you know how it is in Web3. Everyone is working on their own project, but everyone is also really happy to collaborate on stuff. And so like Algovera are very happy to collaborate with you, Greg, on your finance problem. And how do we set that up from the start? It's like an agreement between two companies, like that we're going to work closely together on a project, and we want to ensure that certain securities are in place, I suppose. So that is one of the problems. But then the other problem is that if we agreed on a project, there's not that many data scientists to work on it at the moment. And so that's where the onboarding of data scientists comes into it. But maybe that's a later step. Maybe the first step is to figure out, how do we arrange these agreements and collaborations on machine learning projects using, you know, code or something.
Yeah, I think one potentially cool model, and like this is just, I don't know if this would work, but if you look at like the graph, for example, you know, how you have like indexers, validators, and, you know, people who maintain and create these subgraphs. If you take that concept and then you just translate it to algorithms, right? I think something like that could be pretty interesting as well, where, you know, the incentivization structure is set up, but there's also like validators and a way to, you know, check the work, so to speak, in a decentralized manner.
Yeah, I really like that idea as well. And after the woman from the graph spoke in the kernel thing, I went on a deep dive down the rabbit hole of all of the different stakeholders and stuff. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting one. And I think the graph has almost the most different types of stakeholders in their ecosystem. They've kind of made it one of the most complex. And so I have a feeling ours is even more complex than the graph. So how do we go one step further with all of these different stakeholders that need to come together to make a machine learning project successful?
So I shared a document on types of DAOs. And so that's kind of something we could also look at, is that first graphic kind of shows like You could be a grant giving DAO. You could be a social, which I think is pretty important to hand out grants, because a lot of times these, when you get these new ideas coming in, then you might, listen to a grant proposal and say, oh yeah, I'd be interested in helping out on this project, or, and a lot of times these grants too, if they become successful, then they'll feed that money back into Algovera, and then you can hand that out. So there's that really interesting process. I'm part of 2 grant giving DAOs that's working that way pretty well. And I think we can get funding too, for our projects by saying we're a grant giving DAO. The other aspect is the social or community part of it, I think, is just having these conversations about the tools that we're using. I think that's important to me also. Yeah, so I just thought I'd share that. I think in terms of the overall organization, I think that most DAOs, I can't find the particular graphic I was looking for. I think it was on 1KX somewhere, but basically, we don't really break into working groups until like after a certain amount of time, after a year or something. At the beginning, it's kind of just one organization, maybe kind of with a few people that are kind of leading it somewhat. I know we want to be decentralized, but they're still gonna, we're still seeing you as our leader somewhat, Richard. So you're putting the, everything together. So, and then eventually we start breaking into these more decentralized working groups based on our interests. So just a couple thoughts.
Really interesting. Yeah, the grants giving aspect is another huge question. Like, do we just give grants to projects for interesting ideas, or should it be more bounty driven, or even more ownership driven? Kind of like we're setting up the first hacking session to be. And what would incentivize people to work on projects? But I really like the idea of the grants giving DAO. I think it works really well. Having worked in Ocean DAO for a while. And yeah, I was trying to think, if we were going to launch our own token, like, would we just like fork Ocean and just, because they have this, I don't know if everyone's familiar with the mechanism of Ocean. They basically take the proceeds from the marketplace, buying and selling data sets and algorithms. And I think that all goes to the Ocean DAO, who distribute it to projects that apply for funding. And also like the mining, I think the tokens that are mined, like 51% goes to the Ocean DAO or something over time, and then 49% to the core team to develop software. And so that's a really interesting model, I think. And Trent is great. I think it was Christian, you said in the chat. Yeah, he's just next level on the token engineering stuff. It's absolutely amazing. So we could do worse than just fork Ocean as a grants giving DAO, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's an interesting approach. And like, I think Trent is very open to that, right? Like, he wants people to fork it and use it and make, the most of it. So I think it aligns totally there. But also on like one open-ended question I had for everyone as well is like, I don't know if everyone's familiar with Dune Analytics, but if Dune Analytics had a token, how would that work? Like thinking a little bit about that. I know it's kind of different to what we're saying, but like, if there's an incentive for me to write a complex query for a protocol or a project, how would that work? And they're probably going that way. I don't know. They just raised a lot of money. But that's kind of an interesting way to think about it, potentially.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And, like the whole path that data takes before it gets to the application is really interesting with many contributors. And like, sometimes the job of a data scientist isn't to build a model, but it's just to process the data in a new way, or just look at it from a different way. And so like, how can we incentivize those like micro steps along the way of that path? And, and even reward, like when the final app brings in value, how can we reward all of the people that provided these micro steps along the way? That's really interesting. So maybe like validators.
Maybe like just zooming out a little bit and asking like again the meta question, like of what is the DAO governing, right? Is it governance of capital? Is it validation of work? Is it governance of what direction the exploration of the data should go? Or is it a combination of all of these kind of things, right? And once we identify these components, if this group requires a governance mechanism for capital, then I suppose some sort of mechanism to mint tokens and allocate it to the participants is a viable model. But what if the governance is on the decision of where the data exploration should go? Then it might be a sort of a different mechanism. So there might be actually multiple cogs in this whole organization of getting from data to model. Might be multiple components that we might have to think about.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think, like, in terms of what's needed the most, now that you ask it, I think it's contributions to like data science projects almost. I think that's the thing that's really missing in the space. And until we solve that, we can't scale data science problems in Web3. You know, like we can work on a small handful, like with the few data scientists that we have, but I think, yeah, I think the thing that's missing most in the space is probably like data science contributions and how to incentivize them. That's my feeling. I don't know what everyone else thinks.
I'm not sure if this is what Holly was getting at, but you know, just for example, let's say that we throw up I guess it wouldn't be a grant, it would be more of a bounty, but we'd say, okay, well, our primary challenge is predicting the price of ETH. I know it's a dumb example, but the price of ETH 3 months from now. And we've got 200,000 USDC to whoever comes up with the best model. I guarantee you a lot of people will join this type of project, or could be even more. And there's also a lot of people who would benefit by that type of thing. So I don't know if that was maybe your motivation, Holly, for suggesting grant making as one of the primary functions, but maybe that's the seed that will kind of get everything rolling and people interested. And is that what you were kind of getting at, Holly?
Well, yeah, definitely. Any project that's kind of like on the edge, you know, of the technology, I think. And I think a bounty is a really good idea for something that's really difficult, I think, as opposed to typically with the grants, people already have a project already built in their mind or ready to build, and they just need the money to get it going. And so it's not quite on that edge. But like what you're discussing, what you're saying, Greg, I think is really interesting, is putting a bounty for really something that's really kind of new, you know, to our ecosystem. So yeah, that's a cool idea too.
One small thought that I had was like, I think that's a great idea. And I think though, one thing that would be amazing to add would be, and like, this is kind of the, you know, what I would hope is like the power of decentralization and like coming together as a collective. And this is like one person winning that bounty is great for that person, but isn't like the power in the collective, in a sense where like, you know, say you had 100 people working on this problem and there was like a Google Docs for, you know, like the algorithm that's being written. And I came in and I said, oh, you should actually, you know, create these 7 features and like add them in, because I think that'll increase the performance of the algorithm. And having people like do little additions here and there so that everyone's mind is together, and then the bounty is somehow shared across all the contributors. I think that would be really cool, because you harness the power of everyone's minds at the same time, versus having it like competition based.
Totally agree. Yeah. And this is one thing, I don't know if there was a right moment to insert this into the discussion, but you know, I think Hitesh has mentioned this time and last time as well. You know, this concept of ownership, and it's like, it's very paradoxical, you know, because I think one of the motivations is, you know, we want to reward the contributors, and so that people have ownership over the algorithm. But, you know, the kind of the crux of Web3 is that it's not an individual ownership. It's, you know, it's all open source. We all own it. So I don't know if that helps, but I do see something where, you know, you're part of a DAO, you're contributing, but you also have part of, you know, the exploration of what is built financially or otherwise. So
Yeah,
just a
it's
thought.
definitely interesting. And like, I totally agree as well with the whole distribution of sort of the value created being distributed across the people who created it rather than the one person who figured out the last step. So like the question then becomes, well, how do we track the different contributions that people have made? And how do we weight those contributions? Or do we need to weight them at all? Or is it more so people who've reached a threshold of contribution gets the equal share of contribution? So I suppose the question there is like, how do we measure contribution? In a specific sense of the value it provides, or the value from the data that was sort of derived, not in the term in the sort of commercial sense, or not any other aspect, but purely from a data science perspective. How do we measure the contribution that's added?
That's interesting, and I would follow it up with another question, which is, how would you measure the success of that data science project? Because like, regardless, like, let's forget decentralizing, you know, I'm a data scientist, I'm working on a project, what's the KPI? And so I suppose if you wanted to just objectively look at it from a data science point of view, whatever the KPI of that project is, like say it's achieving the best prediction score, then the contributions to that project in terms of getting a better prediction score, I suppose it would have to be measured that way. Otherwise, I think it'd be tough.
So is it more so that each application has its own measurement rather than there's a general model of contribution measurement, you think?
I would lean towards that, just knowing that like every data science project might have a different KPI or goal, you know, whether it's just cleaning up and wrangling a data set or predicting something or optimizing something. So I suppose like the person, you know, suppose we're talking about this bounty system, the person who puts forward the bounty or the group that puts forward the bounty, I suppose would have to achieve a consensus on what that KPI and goal is.
Yeah. We were trying to think about what that might look like for the generative art project, for example, and like all the ways that we would value contributions. And like one of them would be, you know, attending the hacking sessions or maybe watching the recordings. There might be people who provide their individual expertise, whether it's Holly with her like background in art, gives some ideas, or maybe like Robin from Data Union provides like the GPUs to train the models on, and so that's kind of what we're trying to figure out as we go. Like, what do we value as contributions when we work as a team? Like we should feel what we value and maybe come to a consensus and vote and all that sort of thing. But there's so many different types as well. It's like, how much is too much?
One interesting model I've seen is like the Raid Guild model, where they have like this account manager, and the account manager sort of comes up with a digest of like what, for that particular project, what is the weighted contribution from the different stakeholders. So it's and the sort of account manager is elected and can be replaced and so on. So it's not seen as like a gatekeeper. But the essential idea is that it's project specific, and there's one person evaluating the contribution weights per sort of member of that project. That's an interesting model that could be scaled to multiple projects. So I don't know if people had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And so like you could have a model where if what did you call it? What was the word for it? The project manager?
So they describe it as a account manager.
Okay. yeah, like, and so the account manager is like voted on all the time. And so if they, you know, become corrupt and try to steal everything for themselves or someone they like, then I guess they could be withdrawn straight away or something like that.
Yeah.
So like a curation or a mechanism or something.
But yeah, but it's just trying to get to what Christian was saying about, like, you know, KPI should be project specific, but at the same time, you wanna have somebody figuring out this KPI and making it so that, you know, it can't be rigged in a certain way. So it's a sort of an outside party that is deciding on what the KPI is or how the contribution should be divided up, rather than the contributors themselves figuring out and maybe possibly corrupting the system in the process. And so it's just one model that could work.
Yeah, like the image that comes to my mind is, and I don't know if this is, this would probably be incredibly hard to do, but like if you think about like GitHub, for example, every time, you know, someone makes a contribution to the project and like it's accepted, it's merged, you know, like that, imagine that was on a blockchain. And so like these contributions are measured in that regard. But I think depending on the project, like for example, if art is involved, you know, like that might not be specifically a data science contribution, but still an incredibly important contribution to that project specifically. So yeah, I guess it's interesting.
I also, sorry, Gareth, you've unmuted yourself a couple of times and people have jumped
No,
in.
no, it's fine. Please go ahead. You first.
I was just thinking as well. Are we like too deep into the minutia of the detail, in that, you know, does it make a difference that one person had a contribution that was maybe 0.1% better than another person's, and in the total sort of total value of the aggregated value that the team brings together, does it really make a difference if like one person gets a 1 token more, or like 0.1 token more? Is there a way that is much sort of pragmatic and doesn't sort of doesn't dilute any sort of fairness in a sense? Are we like overcomplicating it a lot, or can we make it a much more a pragmatic solution, where, you know, the model that I always have in mind is like, once you reach a certain threshold of value, everybody should be valued equally, and maybe there's like these outlier contributions that are very, very valuable that should be rewarded. But if you think of it like as a bell curve, most of the, you know, most value created by the members are in that middle section, and there might be few outliers that have contributions and values that are outside the normal scale, but a way to reward them, but also make it pragmatic enough so that it's not, you know, we're not spending the most amount of time in the minutiae of the details. So I don't know if that's worth it.
Yeah, maybe this kind of dovetails into what I was going to comment, which is, you know, if we take a benchmark like the graph, not to say that it's the best, but it's the one that at least a few of us know about. You know, they've got, I think there are 3 or 4 different roles or stakeholders, you know, the indexers, the curators, forget who else is involved, but, you know, let's say that we've got our defined roles with whatever project, be it art or predicting price of ETH, you know, we have our roles. And when we initiate a project, the weights of those roles could be defined at initialization. And if the weights are wrong or unfair, then people are simply not going to join the project and they're not going to push that forward. So it's almost like this mechanism to reward fairness. I don't know, maybe it's not that easy, but at least that's how I imagine something like this.
Yeah, I bet a pretty good first approximation would be to just split it equally, and then, it's like if you track every single like $1 or $2 that you like cover for your friends or something, like there's no point counting it all, because I bet in the long run it evens out to approximately equal, so unless there's like a major outlier of someone who, like, I don't know, dropped out of the project or something like that, those should be pretty easy to solve. So yeah, I think it could be interesting to just initialize it. And does that mean that we're moving away from this idea of spinning up a DAO that comes to consensus on everything, because it's too cumbersome and overcomplicating things, and actually we just need to rely on our human ingenuity?
Yeah, along our conversations, I reached out to my friend who was CTO at Numerai, and helping them create like a homomorphic encryption and stuff, to see if he might be interested. There's a couple of things. It might be it might be out of scope for what we're talking about, but I actually really want to encourage us to think a little more radically when it comes to when we approach questions like governance or fairness and things. And I know that this is also something that Ben cares about as well, Ben Gritzel, which is that on one spectrum you have all the technical minutia. And those are things related to everything from reputation systems to how you're going to do the tokens and everything. But then I also want to make sure that we also keep an end open when it comes to how can this radically change things, because I would think that there's actually a lot people trying to do decentralized AI, but what I haven't seen happening is that people who are actually doing it in a kind of more, if I can use the word, like timeless way, that in a way it's not just concerned about, let's say, ourselves getting fair share of our contribution, but also that the future generation, for example, are allotted in it, and that maybe even future non-human agents and things, like if there is going to be a singularity or something. But the point is that I was bringing up natural-based asset stuff because I wanted us to think about the fact that AI can actually be a major contributor to climate data science, or getting people to have new way of having an asset class. And heck, even maybe even the direction that I would personally want to go is where the Fridays for Future kids who are striking. And now that COP is happening, and I'm also organizing Open COP, I would love to be able to tell them that, hey, the AI guys are not just working for Uber now. If it helps, we can kind of crunch your numbers on how cooling your lifestyle is, and then you can also be a new paradigm innovator. You don't have to just be playing the Wall Street game, and that AI don't have to just serve that. So yeah.
Along those lines too, I've been thinking a lot about retroactive public goods funding also, and that concept of kind of even after 3 months, if somebody actually their AI model does predict the ETH number pretty closely, that those people are actually the people who are going to get the money, or something like that. And or along those lines, even if we give money back to Ian Goodfellow as the original designer of a GAN, or anybody who's put out open source, with lots, plenty of stars on GitHub, basically, that we know that those are projects that are being used and forked and such. And so if we can focus on that too, I think I'd love that too. Love that idea. So.
Yeah, and I mean, just to plug in something, the reason why I put the project Calvin that I worked on is because we actually integrated prediction polling as part of the token system and reputation system as well. But we're also using algorithms like EigenTrust++ to curate reputation and prediction as well. I don't know if you guys probably know what that is. But yeah, if it helps, it's on GitHub. You guys can also just fork that if you like. Mm-hmm. And I should also remind us, there's a tokenomics session in 3 minutes that I really want to get to. So
Plus, I think it's actually very relevant, or could be potentially very relevant to this group. Kind of the way, as far as I understand, they're talking about some sort of profit sharing or tokenomics with the DAO.
For sure, yeah. So some really interesting points raised, and yeah, I really like that as well, Vienna, because like not everything that is an AI model that's useful for humanity is commercially viable as well. And so there's, I guess we're kind of thinking practically in the short term about how we can, build a self-sustaining model, but also I love the idea of, building AI that is good for humanity. And that's not necessarily always going to have a commercial incentive. But yeah, as always, I feel like we could go on for another few hours with this conversation. It seems to happen every time. So each week we think, okay, we'll change the format next week, but then we always think, okay, well, actually there's way more to talk about still, so we'll just continue. So yeah, just thanks everyone for joining, and would love to see you again, like whether it's on Thursday for our hacking session, which is more like practical around the tools, or like next Tuesday where maybe we'll continue this conversation and hopefully like start to come to a consensus about the way that this should work. Maybe it's going to take weeks or years, I don't know, but hopefully it happens at some point. I think we're going in the right direction.
What time on Thursday?
I think it's 5:30 UTC.
30. There's also a calendar you can subscribe to, Ray. That's on the Discord. That will show up in your Google Calendar, all the events that we're doing.
Okay, sounds great.
Fantastic. Thanks a million, everyone.
Yeah, thanks a million, guys. I'm just going to stay and sort of record all the links in the chat. So
great. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you in a few minutes for the next. Is it Sam Williams? I think.
Yeah.